The greatest invention of the 21st century. What do you think it's going to be? AI, flying cars, robotics, who knows? But I think the greatest invention of the 21st century is going to be YouTube. I love watching YouTube videos on surveying, on flying, on all kinds of topics. And I just cannot help myself when I see a YouTube land survey news video. And I say that because it's like the trifecta. You've got YouTube number one, which I love. You've got surveying number two, which I love. And you've got local news. And local news is fascinating because the stories are so short, 2 to 5 minutes. And they're done usually not by investigative journalists, but by the girl who does the weather report at the 15 top of the hour. So it's not like this is, Walter Cronkite reporting. So all of these three factors combine and I'm hooked. And I'm hooked so much that I wanted to share some of these videos with you and walk you through kind of my thinking as a professional surveyor. So let's watch our first video here. This will kick off kind of a new series, Letters to the Editor. And I want you guys to think about the lessons learned and the facts and things and tell me what you think, okay? So let's play this.
Spot to build their home, but now a couple relocating from North Dakota discovered.
It seemed like the perfect spot to build their home, but now a couple relocating from North Dakota discovered they can't build a thing.
It's because of an unusual utility right-of-way easement that they didn't know about.
Super exciting, right? So easements are one of the most heavily litigated parts of property law. And that's because you've got a servient estate where the easement is on top of, and you either have a dominant estate or a dominant person who gets to use the property of another. Now, when you've got two parties using the same land, sparks are going to fly.
When they bought the vacant land, consumer investigator Shannon Benkin joins us live in studio tonight to explain. Shannon.
Josh, Stacy, I have covered real estate for decades. I've never come across an easement issue quite like this one. Donna Hartle and her husband were excited in January when they bought this lot for $17,500.
Wow, $17,500. So just to give you a little context here, this is in South Florida. And I've been looking for a house in South Florida, and you could easily spend $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. And the houses are not that great. I mean, they're okay, but nothing like the mansion you think you would get for that money. They're just regular homes. So if you buy a lot in South Florida for $17,500, that is not even cheap. That's like you've just stolen something cheap.
Nestled between Islewood Drive and Rich Barn Road in Brooksville.
And we really wanted to have some privacy, not be, stranded out in the country. We just felt this was the perfect match.
The real estate listing described the property as your dream home's canvas. The couple hired a builder to draft plans.
So as you notice that was the MLS listing, which called it a dream home canvas. Now, I'm not going to impugn realtors as a whole, but I can tell you I've dealt with realtors many, many times in property disputes. And every time the realtor will say, oh, that's your boundary right on the water's edge over there, or yeah, this whole field is yours. Realtors give like opinions or just say nice things to get you to buy. But realtors are not land surveyors, and realtors cannot give you property determinations, land title determinations, any of that stuff. They're just there to sell you a property. And realtors are often not the most educated as compared to most professionals. So whenever a realtor tells you something, I would recommend being careful and verifying all that information.
And did their homework with Hernando County government.
I was getting the green light on everything. My property was being brought up on the GIS map with the county. I got my setbacks, what I couldn't do. I could bring a modular home and a mobile home, or I could do a single family residence.
Back in January, there was a
So the local county or city, they can tell you general setback requirements. They can tell you general zoning requirements. You know, this parcel is R1 residential. Okay, great. But they're just telling you that for an area of the county. They're not giving you any kind of determinations as to what you can do with the property. They're just telling you what kind of zoning restrictions are in place for this part of the county.
Slender wooden utility pole on the land, which they say they thought would sit just behind their new home. When the couple arrived last month, they found this, a large concrete Duke Energy transmission pole, along with many others up and down the area.
Came to our
Wow. That is a monster of a utility pole. And that's just not a utility pole. That is like a transformer line going to a whole bunch of other houses. That's a monster. And it seems hard to believe that there was a single, small wooden pole, like with one power line there, and then it got switched to this giant transformer line. Seems uncommon, but we'll just leave it at that.
Transmission pole, along with many others up and down the area.
Came to our property on Monday, November 11th, and saw that pole behind us and went, whoa, whoa, whoa. And a neighbor happened to stop by and introduce themselves and said, I don't know what you're doing here, but Duke Energy has an easement over your entire property, and you will never be able to build here.
So why was this lot so cheap? It's because it was likely encumbered by a blanket easement. A blanket easement is where an easement is over the entire property, and they are very common with power companies and other uses for utilities. So Duke Energy, they say, the neighbor told them that there was an easement over the entire property. Well, if you go and look at any property for sale and you see any type of utility, ingress, egress use, whatever, that is a red flag, and you should do serious further investigation.
Donna tells me she had numerous conversations with confused county workers who at first told her they could still build. But after she reached Duke Energy, she tells me she was provided this document that was filed in 1955 prohibiting buildings or structures within 100 feet of this right-of-way.
Wow, that's so interesting. So this document was on record at the courthouse in the property record since 1955. These property owners had constructive notice, most likely. Now, second, remember that there is an affirmative easement which allows someone to do something on your property, but there's also a negative easement. And the negative easement prevents a property from being used in certain circumstances. So what Duke Energy did was they placed a negative easement on this property which said, you cannot build any improvements within 100 feet of our easement. So Duke Energy has essentially restricted the use of the property in exchange for some type of compensation. Somewhat unusual.
So we came back with our wheel and spray paint, and turns out you cannot build 100 feet in any direction of that pole, which leads us to this tiny corner here of maybe 600 square feet. And you can't even build a small home because your septic and well have to be so far away from the home, so that leaves nothing.
The property is zoned for agricultural or residential use, yet the Hartles can't build a residence. Still, they are stuck paying taxes on this land used by the utility company. There is a lot to unpack here. I'm looking into why this didn't come up during the sales process and what was disclosed by the sellers. In the meantime, I spoke with Hernando's assistant property appraiser, and he tells me that this is a very large easement. It's very unusual, and his office did not know about it until the Hartles notified them. Now they have decided to lower the property value by 50% to just $6,691.
Oh, this is a bad one.
You've never seen something like this.
No, I have not.
Okay, so there's so
Note that the news anchors are all perplexed as to what's going on. This is a common symptom when dealing with land surveying or land title issues in local news media.
So many questions, but if you can't build a residence there, then why is it zoned residential? It doesn't make any sense.
That is one of the questions that I
Again, remember that municipality powers involve zoning and setbacks and other types of regulation. But the municipality has nothing to do with private property conveyances such as fee title and easements. And in fact, the local government has no business knowing about this thing because the easement is a private contract between two parties that encumbers a property, usually forever, can be forever. So the local government is not going to protect you when you're engaging in a private property transaction. They're just going to limit what you can do with the property in terms of a regulatory framework.
have been asking the county all day long because it is zoned residential. This easement means that Duke, though, doesn't have to pay any money for this land in order to use it as they are now. So I did ask Duke about this, and I was provided a statement that said that they encourage property owners to do their due diligence to understand the full history and scope of the property, including understanding the terms of any easement.
Now, the last thing here is that I don't know what happened to this video since I read it or since I watched it, but in a previous edition of this video, they also referenced a surveyor who did a survey of this property after closing, and the surveyor, Clyde McNeil, has been investigated and sanctioned by the Florida board many, many times. So really, who's at fault here, guys? Let's think about this. So number one, the realtor said it's inviting property, canvas, whatever. The realtor says whatever. Number two, the title company. I did a little further research, and these easements were in the closing documents given to the buyers when they closed the property. So if the buyers would have simply read their title commitment and investigated the two easements on this property, then they would have known about the encumbrance and they never would have bought the property. So number one, the property buyers should have done their due diligence, which appears not to have been done. Now, number two, was the local government at fault? No. Local governments do not handle private property conveyances, encumbrances. Local government likely did nothing wrong. Number three, the realtor in terms of due diligence. Well, that's not the realtor's job either. So buyer beware, caveat emptor. But this is kind of offset by the fact that the surveyor gave these poor property owners a survey showing no easement on the property. So they had a title commitment, which did show the easement, but the survey did not. So I'm going to have to put some of the blame on the surveyor, definitely. But remember, caveat emptor, due diligence before you ever purchase a property.